we're living times in which we feel that we're living dangerous times. Democracy, freedom, and human rights are being threatened all over the world because criminal organizations, corrupt governments, and tyrants in the dictators that we have left in the world are becoming a more dangerous threat to all the free world and the countries that are still fighting for their democracy and their freedom. To speak about these issues, I have the privilege of presenting to you Mr. Michael Chertoff. He served as the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security from 2005 to 2009. He was a federal judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit and headed the criminal division at the U.S. Department of Justice. He co-founded the Chertoff Group and serves as its executive chairman, focusing on security and business strategy. Secretary Chertoff, welcome to Guatemala and to Latin America, and welcome to Razón de Estado. You're focusing now, after all the experience that you have after being such an important judge and the Secretary of Homeland Security, in technology, security, and how it is affecting democracy and human rights. What is your diagnosis in this world that is going through such rough times?
Well, I think in part the technology has challenged our traditional understanding of the roles and responsibilities of government and individuals. In particular, we're beginning to see the real explosion in what we call disinformation, which is the use of technology in order to create real illusions that can mislead people about what the facts are. Also, we're finding with artificial intelligence, algorithms have been developed that allow political actors to target individuals based on their personal interests and personal anxieties in a way that's very manipulative. So what we're seeing is that information and the information space has become a domain in which political operatives can try to manipulate voters and undermine trust in the political system.
Yes, and which role is or are playing, governments like the Chinese or the Russian that, we hear a lot of things, but tell us what you know about them.
Well, the Russians, have always been believers in propaganda. If you go back 100 years, what has changed is the technology has given them a tremendous ability to amplify the scope of what they do. So part of what they do is they will impersonate people online so that you may be thinking you're getting a message from your friend when it's really somebody sitting in St. Petersburg. They use the technology to increase the scale of their propaganda, but again, to tailor it to the individual audiences that they're dealing with. We saw that with Cambridge Analytica back in 2016. And they're also using the technology as a way of simply creating distrust. Because if at some point you're not sure whether something is true or not, you may wind up not believing anything. And in that environment, what winds up happening is you tend to be directed by what you hope to believe and not what the facts are.
Yes. With the experience that you have, Mr. Secretary, how would you compare what you have seen throughout your professional life, being so close to very important positions, and what's going on in today's world? Are you more worried today than you were decades ago?
I'm more worried today about whether we've lost the trust, which is the foundation of democracy. If you think about what democracy is based upon, among other things, it's based on the idea of truth. We can know what's a fact. And also whether we trust people to try to do the right thing. Even if they're not perfect, we trust the process in the government. But in a world where that's undermined, particularly using technology, then people wind up being directed by their emotions or by their fears. And if I look at what the enemies of democracy do, is they use fear and anxiety and identity issues as a way of manipulating people and tapping into their fear and their hatred, and that's how you begin to undermine democracy and create internal strife.
Yes. How important it is for the people of the world to develop a critical thinking in order to be able to interact with all this technology and misinformation.
Critical thinking is the key to avoiding being manipulated. If you have critical thinking, you look at a message that's being disseminated and you ask yourself, who is doing it? Why are they doing it? Does this key into something that's going on in the world now? that suggests it's being done deliberately in order to manipulate you. Without critical thinking, you simply take things at face value and you believe what you might want to believe or what your fears impel you to believe, and that plays into the hands of people who want to undermine democracy and solidarity.
Yes. We have lived through cycles, throughout history, and definitely we're going now through a rough cycle where, threats and problems are right there, How optimistic could you say that you are that in 10 or 15 years we are going to have learned and been able to, go to the next cycle in a much stronger and better position?
We've had challenges to our solidarity and our democracy and our love of freedom before. We had it in the 30s. In the 60s, to some degree, we had it with terrorism, and we've come out of them. So on the one hand, I say to myself, well, history is like a series of cycles. We've cycled out of them. But the truth is, it doesn't operate automatically. It requires people to commit themselves in a way that will foster democracy. So I don't want people to walk away and say, well, this will change in 15 years. I just have to hold my breath. Yes. I want people to understand that things will change and get better if we make it happen. And that means everybody has to be engaged. They have to vote. They have to speak the truth. They have to be willing to support people who stand for values of freedom and democracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we definitely need a statesman like you, keeping on telling us these things and being so close to the security system still today, and with your experience and being part of Freedom House, we definitely need you around. So thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch.